Thanks for watching part 2 of this special program, AI, Human-Centric Design and Government Tech Adoption, brought to you by ServiceNow. We recorded it live at their federal forum in Washington, D.C. I'm your host, Francis Rose, with the Government Matters Thought Leadership Network. We have a lot of ground to cover, including how leaders can get the most out of their people to achieve larger IT goals, success stories, and teachable moments at the intersection of tech adoption and change management, plus the concept of anticipatory government. In part 1, you heard from IT leaders at the General Services Administration and State Department. Now, expert insight and analysis from the Department of Homeland Security, General Dynamics Information Technology, and ServiceNow. Let's jump right in. Bob Osborne is the Chief Technology Officer for Global Government at ServiceNow and former CIO at the National Nuclear Security Administration. Martin Stanley, Senior Advisor for Artificial Intelligence at CISA at the Department of Homeland Security, and Brian Foggs, the Chief Technology Officer for Federal Civilian at General Dynamics Information Technology. Gentlemen, welcome. It is great to see all of you again. Thank you for coming today. Martin, I want to start with you because artificial intelligence will be one of the maybe biggest breakthroughs in the history of security, of information technology security. What specifically are you seeing happen with it at CISA right now?
This is the last time we talked, Francis. We've taken our strategic technology roadmap and we've identified use cases that we want to pursue. These are things like analytics, security orchestration, automated response, things like that, to make sure that we've matched up the requirements that our program areas have with the capabilities that these technologies enable.
Mm-hmm. How are you developing those use cases? How are you looking at the various pieces of your operation and the capabilities that maybe you don't have now that you need in the future, and deciding, yes, this is a good fit for AI, or no, this might not be the right place to at least start?
So we have to actually, at CISA, we have to look at it from 3 different perspectives. We have to look at it from how we're going to use these technologies, how our stakeholders are going to use these technologies, and then how our adversaries potentially are going to use these technologies. So what that means is, and I think this is a great thing to talk about here at this event, how are the people going to interact with these technologies? We have existing processes. How do we make those technologies complementary? We've looked at different kinds of criteria that we want to employ as we decide what jobs are best to automate. Things like high benefit, low regret, understandable, and certain kinds of processes, things that we can look at and then not get into too much trouble initially.
Mm-hmm. Brian, I think one of the misperceptions that non-tech people in the federal workforce had about AI is to the point that Martin just made. How are people going to interact with this technology? I think a lot of people thought people weren't going to interact with this technology and it was just going to be something we did on autopilot over here. How has that cultural idea impacted the way that the people that you talk to in government are thinking about what they're doing?
So one of the things that we found in this particular segment is that a mission integrated partner mindset is really key to getting the focus and the right set of questions. Oftentimes it can be quickly moved to a data management problem, a data science. Is it somebody that's trying to focus on a technology, when in fact it's really the mission outcome that they're trying to do, and the influx of information of how we approach it, how we engage the people in that process, and really get them to think creatively about where they want to take that next step down this journey. We have an interesting intersection now between cloud, which gives very scalable compute and storage. We have an opportunity to secure it in interesting ways, and then there's opportunities now to unleash that through analytics, artificial intelligence, to get after the sets of things that couldn't be done cost effectively before. And so I think it's a really convergence kind of model that's happened, the perfect storm of bringing things together that historically have been a real challenge, either from a budget or from a human mindset.
So you use a term there that jumps out at me. We now have ways to secure it in interesting ways. What does that mean, and what's different about the way that organizations like CISA and others inside the federal government should approach securing these kinds of breakthrough technologies that might be different or more advanced or something else from more traditional legacy type applications?
One of the things we found right now is that zero trust as a concept is really emerging as a topic that is, I guess, open to discussion, where before it was really more of an esoteric story. And so being able to look purposefully and not just securing the data, but actually the use and intended use of that data. So if we look at artificial intelligence and the models, sometimes an adversary might attack the core precepts of the training sets, let alone the actual outcomes. And so you have to be able to agilely shift that mindset around to look in different areas.
We've talked in the past about human-centric design, Bob. What does that look like in an artificial intelligence environment? What makes the tools that one uses to interact with artificial intelligence more friendly to the person that's using that in that interaction scenario that we've talked about?
Well, we're really being conditioned to that every day in our personal lives, right? We interact with Siri or Alexa. We carry them around with us all the time. Now it links into our vehicles and we connect and we interface and interact with our technology in many different ways that is very human-like. Mm-hmm. So this human-like application to the technology space is really new. And when we talk about the security aspects around that portion of AI, we also have to be aware of the psychological and emotional reactions we have to the humanization aspect. So I like Francis Rose, so I trust Francis Rose. If Francis Rose tells me something, I believe it until I'm proven otherwise. In technology, particularly in the government space, where we have to be really aware of who has access to the information, what information has been accessed by whom, if it has been modified or changed in any manner, and when it's presented, what's our confidence level in what that information that's being presented is for the user. When AI is augmenting that and putting context around that information to support a critical decision for humans, if there's that humanized aspect of trust that may be misplaced a bit, that's a cause for concern. So there's a risk there that just needs to be added to the overall risk matrix as we look at this type of technology.
I will do what I can to make sure to not prove you otherwise so that you can continue to believe whatever I tell you, Bob.
I trust I will.
I appreciate that. What does this look like in the commercial sector, Brian? Is government as far behind the curve as it perceives that it is in other areas when it comes to this kind of human interaction with AI?
So I'd say that there's so much interest now in getting at this problem directly. And one of the timely topics that we're seeing, robotic process automation, looking at ways of driving in some of these analytical discussions. And we've kind of framed this around a concept of IPA as a service, intelligent process automation, to try to generate some excitement around where can you go. We've actually, just interestingly, seen a little bit of excitement on India Pale Ale as a service. That got a lot more headway on the initial thoughts.
I imagine.
But really getting into this idea of can we take and have exposed the set of processes that are repeatable, mechanical, that humans are doing, have that exposed through software and services so that now we can reposition not just the human element on understanding what the processes are and discovering them, but actually putting them into practice and then allowing the human element to elevate, to be able to focus on higher order problems, more interesting, challenging problems, and let the technology help enable the more menial collection of certain artifacts or activities inside of this AI framework.
Brian, it sounds like that you listened to the conversation that Martin and I had last time we talked about this, because Martin, it sounds like the same kind of analytic process that you went through at CISA to see, yes, this, as we talked about earlier, yes, this is potentially a good application for us. No, we're going to hold off for now.
Right, and I think one of the things that we were talking about backstage is all the federal government-wide efforts that are ongoing. Gartner talks about most organizations are involved in the preparation phase for AI, and I think the government is well in that preparation phase. There's a lot of efforts we can talk about, but in particular, I think the federal data strategy that was recently released is very critical to this, because so much, up to 80% of the artificial intelligence implementation is related to curating the data, finding the data, being able to use it, all those kinds of things, and to be purposeful about how we're going to manage the government's data and the way that we use that data is helpful for agencies. We've got our corresponding local implementation of a federal data strategy that we're putting together for CISA to manage the information that we use, and having the principles and the policies and the regulations around how that data is used is very important, as well as the technology.
Bob, We have the federal data strategy. We have an AI strategy and executive order from the White House. We have the President's management agenda that specifically addresses data and its implementation in improving customer experience. Are there other guideposts, are there other documents or policies that agencies should pay attention to, or that should be provided to them to pay attention to, that maybe don't exist today, to build out the kind of vision and framework we've discussed on this stage today?
Well, I think the policy directives that you described really are freeing up agencies to take advantage of technology. There's also legislation such as the MGT Act and the ability to have FISMA, controls and understanding for spending constraints on the government as well, that allow us to have a framework in which there's a lot of latitude now for agencies to actually develop and deliver new technologies. But you asked a really poignant question previously that I wanted to just pick on a little bit, and that was whether the federal government was ahead or behind on the adoption of new technologies such as AI. And I think that there's a inflection point right now of where the commercial market is really at in applying this type of technology and where the federal government is, with two totally different lenses that they're viewing the same technology through. So the Internet of Things is driving the new application of machine learning algorithms that aggregate information or data and present it as contextual information in our personal lives that really enhance what we're able to do. The federal government has taken, as they should, a more studied and stable approach toward what AI makes sense for the applications to drive an outcome on the mission that the agency is responsible for. I think as we begin to broaden that, and what both Martin and Brian have been able to describe today is how they're really looking at this through that more commercial-like lens, but through that risk matrix that I talked about previously to really protect the government information.
When we talked about the kind of the triage process or the analytics process, we didn't talk much about a risk management framework, but I imagine that was a really important part of the way that you looked at this and the way that you look at it moving forward.
Right, and I think there's a couple things to talk about here. You know, the first is a lot of the existing risk management frameworks, a lot of the existing IT security controls, a lot of the existing ways of doing IT apply to artificial intelligence and machine learning. So you don't want to recreate the wheel. It's looking at where things are different. I'd also call folks' attention that aren't aware to the National Security Commission for Artificial Intelligence. Their report, their initial report, which they released, I think it was back in November. There's a lot of good stuff in there about what things we should be thinking about at a national level. And then there's the NITRD Artificial Intelligence Research and Development strategy update that was released last year as well, which has all the priorities laid. I think there's 8 priorities, and you can see what agencies are thinking about, because that's where those priorities get revealed.
The juxtaposition, Brian, of all of these framing documents and policies and so on to what you talked about earlier about the creativity that these technologies are freeing up, though, might seem a little counterintuitive. Yeah, you can be as creative as you want as long as you do all these things that are in all these documents. What's that intersection look like, and how does that fit with the change management piece, where people like Martin and like the folks that we talked to earlier today are really generating, whether it's driven by the customer or driven by them, they're generating tremendous change in the way these organizations are doing business?
One of the things we found as part of engaging in this, we're in an era replete with solutions and technologies. It's very straightforward to get down a path. What we really want to do is engage in a dialogue around what is the art of the possible, so we can shift the dialogue from how you would implement to what you want to accomplish and where do you want to take it. And then frame up some examples of where we see these solutions that are emerging in the market. And these can come out of venture capital companies, that can come out of very large implementations that are done in the commercial space. And now for the first time really seeing a lot of energy that's cross-pollinating across the federal government. So solutions and thoughts that are being done in the DoD or Intel community being absorbed quickly and cleanly over into the federal civilian marketplace for the first time I can remember. And that's exciting to see, because now we're starting to get at some of those shared problems, shared services, and start thinking about AI not just as a point solution, but as a broad way to attack a class of problems that historically have been dug in as a data science problem. Now we can make it a mission-focused problem. And that's where I see excitement. We get the engagement in certain conferences There's emerge events that are around this industry to unlock this opportunity to get those kind of dialogues going. Not trying to get to a sale, trying to get to what's the problem needing to be solved.
More with DHS, GDIT, and ServiceNow next. You're watching AI, Human-Centric Design, and Government Tech Adoption on the Government Matters Thought Leadership Network. Stay with us.
AI, Human-Centric Design, and Government Tech Adoption is brought to you by ServiceNow, making the world of work better for people.
Welcome back. Applying artificial intelligence in your organization is complex for technical reasons alone. It can be even more complex when that organization relies on data from both the public and private sectors at massive scale. Let's hear more now from our panel of practitioners who have a long track record of doing just that. Are we far enough down this path for success stories, or is it still too early to talk about success stories? Martin, You're nodding your head, so I'll ask you too.
So yeah, there's great examples across the federal market space. We have to be careful in how we share them from our customers, because there are certain things that they are doing and discovering that you have to be very careful what you release out. But it's an exciting time, and they're starting to drive to decisions that are data-driven based on the set of data they've already got. They haven't had to be creative. They can move on and then move these across their particular organizations in clean and interesting ways. And I really get excited when the Intel community starts playing in this space, because we're seeing that side as well.
Are we to the point yet where they're making decisions based on data that is entirely based on data sets from the beginning? They're not thinking up questions and then having to go and find the data and then analyze it. They've got the data, they've got it inventoried and curated, and they can just start asking stuff. Are we there?
Yeah, we're there. We're replete with data. Data is not the problem.
The discussion about data that we always had, though, was, yeah, we had the data, Bob, but was it inventoried and curated? And it sounds, are you seeing that too, that we've cracked that nut and we're able to kind of move on to the next step?
So I think we have a good understanding of what the process is to make that data contextual within the different agencies. There's, of course, a wide range of maturity in achieving the outcomes that each of the agencies have described as their end state, but we're definitely on the road. We're seeing great utilization, and there's some pretty good success stories out there.
So Martin, I didn't want to put you on the spot, but you nodded so emphatically when I talked about success stories that I feel like I should give you a chance to talk about whatever you want to say.
Well, sure. So I think Beth mentioned in the last panel about pilot efforts. I think there's a lot of pilot efforts that we're seeing across the government in all these technology areas, and those are great. In particular, one of the ones that we're focused on is looking at some of the capabilities that the JAIC has developed around humanitarian assistance and disaster relief to support our emergency support function 14 coordination role. So we're looking at ways that we can adapt some of this technology into our mission space, and it's really promising.
The JAIC concept is fascinating to me because when GSA and the JAIC started working together on a Centers of Excellence program, I think there was a perception that all the other COEs were kind of triaging, were fixing organizations that were not as successful as we'd like them to be. JAIC relatively new and by all accounts relatively successful. So what do you think the significance of that is, Bob, in the context of what we're talking about here, that's the next one, that's the place where the administration and the federal government as a whole has kind of placed its next big bet?
Well, I think this is an illustration of why government has to become more agile in everything that they do. So the JAIC, the Joint Artificial Intelligence Center, is really the latest organization to address specifically the capabilities of this emerging technology. But we've had DARPA that looks at things for a long time, and that model of research and development has kind of been the standard bearer previously. The JAIC is a new model. So anytime you have a new model that's having success and gets the attention, the others seem to pale, but it's really just a matter of, okay, they have to retool, refocus based upon the information and the learning that's happened. So the biggest thing that I see that's really going to help government across the board is now they're sharing more information, not just about the outcomes of what they're looking at, but the process of how they got there. And that's going to raise the tide's going to raise all those boats for us.
Martin, you're in the information sharing business at CISA. That's why you exist. What does that look like in terms of the way that you've been able to curate, inventory, and so on, And what have you learned from all of these processes that if somebody's starting this today, you would say, do this, maybe don't do that, don't do as much, whatever?
So I think generally what I would say is that you have to understand the needs of your stakeholders, and you have to understand the sensitivities around the information that you're collecting and how you share that and how you make it available. But you also have to do it fast. You have to do it much faster than we've done previously. And so the challenge then is to take all this information that's coming in and to deliver actionable information to the right parties, in a timely manner.
What have you seen, what have you found is effective at being able to bust some of the barriers that you've run into? Speed is one. Have you found ways that can accelerate these processes for you? Tell me more about that.
So we've got a number of initiatives that are automated, whether it's the CDM dashboard where we're pushing information out to agencies, or it's our AIS program, automated indicator sharing. Those I think are our first steps. But to get to where we can really respond in minutes and hours versus days and weeks, we still have some work to do.
Mm-hmm. We've talked about what the future looks like, and I think that's important to consider with these technologies because, Bob, we've mentioned many times in this conversation and previous ones, tech for tech's sake's no value. What the end state looks like, and maybe that's not even right anymore because we're thinking so far over the horizon that we won't be around for the end state, or there might not ever be one. But what do some future markers look like that Martin and his colleagues in government should aspire to around this convergence of all of these technologies?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head when you said, I don't think there is an end state, and that's absolutely true, and we've seen that previously. It's an ever-evolving adoption of technologies as they're made available and then proven to the point where they can be applied in government agencies. But as far as milestones, it really is focused on, and we've heard it both last week as well as tonight, we've heard about mission focus, outcome-based. As long as we're doing citizen and employee-centric design and leveraging all the different technologies that we have today with an eye toward future technologies, creating an agile capability within the agency to adopt and deploy those to support the activities for increased mission delivery is going to deliver success for those agencies.
As I'm trying to envision all of these pieces together, Brian, I'm thinking about them kind of like my kid's Lego set from years ago, where no matter what you build, you can build something else into it that fits onto that, and it can be some conglomeration that you never would have imagined when you started out. Am I thinking about the future state of this, the milestones that Bob alluded to a moment ago? Am I thinking about that the right way?
I'd say this is what we're seeing. A lot of it really emerged initially out of some of the research organizations that were really focused around sharing and unlocking data to support different kinds of missions. And then we've seen new partners evolve in the market space that have software as a service offerings. And now, rather than approaching these problems as monolithic kind of top to bottom stack development, we can start pulling together the pieces that make sense, integrate them together, share around the business processes that you're trying to get the best possible solution around, and then deliver that out into the market space so it can be consumed, and it doesn't tie you to a particular decision that you might have made 3 years ago. A lot more agility, a lot more flexibility, and a lot of excitement that we can actually get more focus on the mission you're solving, not the mechanism that's underlying it.
Is there some change that you're either undertaking already, Martin, for a government organization like CISA to be able to do that? Because traditionally, government hasn't been really good at that. And if so, what is it? If not, what would you like it to be?
Well, so I think a couple things have happened, with respect to that. One is just the creation of our agency, so that we have a unity of effort across all of our mission spaces. And in an interesting anecdote, I had the opportunity to sit through a session. It was an all-day long session where all of our divisions came in and spoke about the technical requirements they envision that they need to support their mission space. And I tried to, as we listen to these very disparate mission spaces, we've got cybersecurity, we have emergency support when there's natural disasters, we have all kinds of things along those lines, infrastructure protection. The common theme across all these requirements, I was trying to pull out, like, what are the high level things we should be focused on. It was this. It was, at the end of the day, this is all about helping people. And so if we keep that focus and we prioritize those efforts, I think that's a very good measuring stick for how well we're doing.
Brian and Bob, I continue to be encouraged by the fact that we keep coming back, when I hear people from government talk about these issues, we keep coming back to providing whatever service it is, delivering whatever service it is that our organization is chartered to bring.
What I really like is also the movement. Traditionally, the 3 I's are brought into this discussion: inspiration, leading to an idea of driving out those new ideas. How do I get those in front of people, and then how do I get them implemented? When I think of those kind of traditional models, what's really nice is it's shifting now to automation and elevation. I can automate the things that make sense to automate and elevate up the capabilities of the underlying human staff as their own capabilities are enhanced by leveraging this. So it's not a replacement strategy, it's really being able to elevate. And I like the all boats float kind of analogy here, so that we're all able to take advantage of that and deliver it out across our workforces, whether it's commercial or government.
So 1 minute left, Bob, and I come back to one of those documents that we talked about earlier, the President's Management Agenda, because what Brian just described is moving from lower value to higher value work, not moving employees out and replacing them with machines.
That's right. People aren't very good at repetitive tasks. We want to automate all that. A lot of errors are made so you can have a more efficient and effective process. However, there are inherently human decisions in any process, and particularly in the government, there's inherently governmental processes and decisions. That needs to be elevated. The AI gives us contextual data that enhances that decision so it's better, lower error rate, and more quick on answering that question in the process. And then when that person has that capability, they're part of a team, the team performs better, the teams within the agency performs better, and we have a great outcome for everyone. I'm hearing wonderful things from the government on that regard. Our partners are delivering really top-notch solutions, and it's an exciting time to be in technology in the government.
A very quick final thought, the nexus of inherently governmental and artificial intelligence is something we could take to the moon.
Yeah.
What do you see as the most important thing for organizations to consider there about what's fit for AI and what's really not appropriate for AI?
Identifying trust, having that risk matrix identified. You have to know where your data is coming from, have total trust in that data, or at least a percentage of trust in the solution set that's being delivered by the AI to support that human decision, but it always comes back to the people.
Bob Osborne, Martin Stanley, Brian Fogg, thanks all very much. It's great to have you here. And thank you for watching part 2 of this special program, AI, Human-Centric Design and Government Tech Adoption. We recorded it live at ServiceNow's Federal Forum in Washington, D.C. For more, go to govmatters.tv/ServiceNow. For the Government Matters Thought Leadership Network, I'm Francis Rose.
From Washington, D.C. and around the world, this is Government Matters. With Francis Rose. Covering the business of government 6 days a week. Weeknights at 8 and 11 p.m. on WJLA 24/7 News. Sundays at 10:30 a.m. on ABC7 and worldwide on the American Forces Network. Tech. Security. Defense. Workforce. Acquisition. Issues that matter. The business of government. Government Matters.